All right, here I am. This is my first video actually talking about something. And the stuff that's on my mind, it's been on my mind more lately, and actually for years, though, it's been on and off on my mind, is the values and ideas of practice and hierarchy in music, in different musical cultures, actually, because I've been involved in a few different scenes and legitimately participating in a few different scenes. I mean, I originally came out of, well, when I was a little kid, I came out of metal, but I mean, when I first was being in scenes, being in a culture, it was like DIY, punk related DIY, hardcore, post hardcore, indie related stuff, that's a realm. I was in that. I came out of that. I came up through that. And Zzzz, the first band that I really did stuff with, the first band I toured with, made records. It was in that DIY scene. You just hit someone up. Can I play a show? Stay at your house? Yeah, stay at my house, man. Play. We put on a show in the garage. You can crash with us. We'll split the door money, like whatever. That kind of thing. And it's always been a weird thing for me because that scene, even though it's so dear to me, it has always lacked this valuing of hierarchy and practice. And those two things together are a big part of what I deep down really ultimately require of art and the artist's life, man. It's absolutely essential. And so let me give you a sense of just what I mean is that, like, punk, it's just the main thing with punk and DIY type stuff is that, like, anyone can do it, man. It's like, when I saw the Velvet Underground, when I saw the Stooges, I immediately started a band because, like, anyone can do it. That's beautiful, but it also sucks, dude, because it's like when I want excellence, like I want beauty. Yes, there's a beauty to anyone can do it, but it's like if anyone can do it, it's just hanging out. You know what I'm saying? And even hanging out isn't exactly egalitarian because you don't want to hang out with every fucking asshole. You have like friends that you choose. Anyway, but that's the thing. So it's like I started off like punk and indie music in high school, but then like toward later in high school, I got really into jazz. Okay, and this is when I started to really realize what was fucked up about punk and DIY. Even though I kept going in DIY after that, and it's remained a huge part of my cultural life. And my lifeblood during most of my 20s. Even still early on, I had this deep critique, and there was always this tension. Um, Relating to practice and hierarchy. So it's like the reason I got really into jazz in high school, even though I knew I was never going to be a jazz musician for my life, I knew that wasn't going to be my real creative statement in the world. I was so deep into studying jazz and that culture because in that realm, the whole life of being a jazz musician is so centered around this ascetic practice of just personally going home and for hours working on yourself. Not just yourself, like I'm working on myself, I'm like eating right. It's like, no, like making what you are, like practicing your instrument and just aspiring to greatness, and it's just such a beautiful thing to just do that in this religious way. It's a religious practice. And I've just gotten back into thinking about this more and more lately because I've been reading the book by Peter Sloterdijk, the book You Must Change Your Life. And I know the title sounds just like an absolute jerk off and stuff, but if you haven't read this book, it's deep. And I'm only like a third of the way through it. But yeah, he talks about practice and how, that used to be what religion was about, like prayer, monks, even just lay people, this sense of prayer, building yourself, making yourself through repetitive action. And after the death of God, it becomes, which we accept as a fact, after the death of God, it becomes more complex, what it means, sort of unclear what that kind of practice means. He's talking about anthropogenics. He's talking about man making himself or herself. You know what I'm saying? Um, this repetitive practice of something that personally, there's a good, better, and best, and even better, and even better, a striving upwards. So this is practice and hierarchy, that, and he uses it's so cool. He uses the word vertical tension. That's like his thing. I love that. That in order to make oneself and make what you are, continually, it's repetitive actions that where you improve and are pulled upward. There's this striving upward, spires toward the sun. You know what I mean? And that to me is a big part of what I'm trying to do here. You know, and it's always run. That kind of thing of practice and hierarchy has always been in tension and not always conflict, but it's been, there's this rub between that and this sort of more egalitarian thing of like, we're all in the scene together, man, and it's like fraternity, and you can sleep on my floor, and like we're all sharing the money, and it's all, you know what I mean? And it's the thing, like I don't want to get like political in any kind of ideological way because I'm so not an ideologue, but it is kind of a left-right thing, I mean, a hierarchy is right-wing, you know what I mean? I'm so not a fucking right-wing guy, but that's right-wing energy, man, you know what I mean? So, yeah, even though, I exist in such a left milieu socially, I mean, that's just the whole vibe, it's just left, yeah, so, but one of the big, and this was Zzzz, we all came out of jazz and we're really into classical music, which is like even more hierarchy. Well, it's a different kind of practice and hierarchy. Maybe we'll talk about that. But one of the things with Zzzz that we were so all about, and consciously, not just in retrospect, but at the time, was that Zzzz operating in the DIY scene. Zzzz, if you didn't know this, what Zzzz was and still kind of is just very, very complex, hyper-schooled, intensely rehearsed, complex classical music, prog, free jazz, noise shit. And we would play in the DIY noise, who gives a fuck kind of scene. Well, I shouldn't say who gives a fuck, but that sort of all-inclusive, horizontally oriented, sort of left-leaning scene. And we were very conscious that our insane rigor and discipline that we were enacting on stage, this vertical tension, was a critique of that scene and a challenge to that scene and special in that scene. And people were into it. That's the thing. We were like, are people even going to be into this like nerd practice your instrument 10 hours a day shit? Is that like, and they were super into it because it was exotic and it was like a critique, It's like, yeah, work, dude. And it really, the big essence of that critique of this sort of bringing this jazz and classical energy into the sort of noise DIY scene, a big part of it, something that I always, I guess I'm going to use the word hated. And it's like, I feel kind of like a dick trashing in a way this scene that I love, but that's what you do. You critique the hell out of things that you love and are a part of, like your family, your friends. So, the thing about punk, indie rock, that whole world, one of the just most hypocritical, misled things about it is there's been this there's a social sense in that scene that like if you know about music theory or if you have technical virtuosity or proficiency or if you're polished as a musician, you've got chops, there's this idea that that's like bourgeois or something, that it's like, oh, like you went to music school, like, I don't know nothing about that, man. I just checked out one Stooges record, like, and it's like, I love Stooges, but there's this misled, and I always hated that because first of all, so much of that was like middle class kids who could go to college or did or whatever, but they're hiding it, and they're just like, yeah, I don't know what a C major chord is. It's like, yeah, you could have known, but you chose to just be sloppy and not know, and thinking that practice and that knowledge and that vertical tension and that striving upward for hierarchy, at least personal hierarchy, practice and hierarchy, thinking the way indie rock and punk sort of, the way that culture is supposed that that's somehow some bourgeois function of privilege, completely missed the point that jazz, as well as most musics in the world, gospel music, salsa, I don't know, Balinese gamelan, Javanese gamelan, like all these, it's Carnatic Indian music. It's like all of these musics, these are not bourgeois, dork, college rich kid musics. These are like deeply embedded musics of like indigenous people, oppressed people, people with no money. It's like rap even is, at least originally, was based on battling and skills and practicing your rhymes and like going back to the lab and shit. And it's like it's just like just something about it, just punk and the whole DIY thing. It remains to this day kind of misled, like thinking that having chops and practicing is somehow privileged or rich or like white or something. It's really it's dumb. So yeah. So this is I've just been getting back into that sort of pseudo religious ascetic idea. I've been listening to a lot of jazz lately, and that's yeah, that's just something that's on my mind. Like let's get some discipline up in this fucking place, shall we? Thank you.